about the color she's wearing, not to be, trite about it, but Kamala Harris is wearing purple, which is something that's pretty significant to her. When she ran for president, one of her colors of her campaign was purple and yellow. That is a nod to Shirley Chisholm, who ran for president as a Black woman decades ago and has inspired her political career.
72.
And 72.
1972.
And so you see Kamala Harris nodding to this a major moment in American history for so many people, for so many women, people of color, for her sorority sisters in Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated. And she's standing there right next to Mike Pence, current Vice President of the United States. The two have spoken on the phone in just the last few days. But other than that, have had not a whole lot of contact since she became Vice President-elect.
Just look at, you can't see her entire face because of the COVID crisis. There she is saying hi to Jim Clyburn. He is the House Majority Whip, the Dean of the South Carolina Congressional Delegation. This is a historical moment.
He's wearing his
highest
South Carolina
ranking
State University hat, his alma mater.
The highest ranking Black member of Congress in history. Chatting, he just lost his wife not long ago, chatting with Kamala Harris, this historical figure, the first Black woman to ever be a vice president of the United States.
And not just that, Jim Clyburn is the reason those two people are there today. He helped boost Joe Biden. But look at Kamala Harris's face. You can see she's obviously greeting people. You can see that the vice president-elect is trying to take it in. You saw earlier, and she's doing it now, she kind of looked up, and you almost could see her thinking to herself, I need to remember this. I need to take this moment in. She'll see the pictures and so forth afterwards, but I can't even imagine what an out-of-body experience it is for her.
It's a moment of face. It's a moment of history that she's making yet again as someone who has done this in a lot of her positions, being the first Black woman, the first South Asian woman to hold several of the positions that she's had in her life. Back when she was a prosecutor in California, she was one of just a handful of Black United States senators, and now she will be the first Black woman, South Asian woman in the to be Vice President of the United States.
As the ceremony continues, let's go to Wolf Blitzer right now.
All right, there you go. We can see the President-elect of the United States, Dr. Joe Biden. They're going to be walking in as well, and then they will be introduced. But this is the first time we're actually seeing them inside the Congress. They're introducing the congressional leadership right now, John, the Democrats and Republicans. And I just want to alert our viewers that we're also going to be having some excellent, truly excellent musical presentations. Lady Gaga will sing the national anthem. Jennifer Lopez will do some special musical selections, and Garth Brooks will as well. But in the meantime, let's get ready for the President-elect of the United States.
And the Honorable Elaine L. Chao and Staff Representative.
An American celebration, Wolf, with the world watching. Soon to be President of the United States, Joe Biden, walking out with his wife, Jill Biden. The pictures tell us about history. The pictures tell us about the resilience. 2 weeks ago, we were watching thugs run through these halls. Now we're watching the military honor guard there as the former vice president, former senator, soon to be president of the United States, walks through with the first lady, soon to be first lady, Jill Biden. Just remarkable history. The election of Joe Biden, now the inauguration of Joe Biden. What a moment. The weight.
And they've played at every inauguration since Jefferson's. Biden's approaching their seats on the platform here. Greeting former VP Dan Quayle.
Look at his eyes.
Pride.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
That's a phrase that is well welcomed right now. Let's enjoy the ceremony.
Please welcome the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Vice President Pence, Mr. President-elect, Madam Vice President-elect, members of Congress and the judicial branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does: goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible. My friend and the chair of the inaugural committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
Well, I should have known when Senator Klobuchar got involved, at least there'd be a touch of snow up here this morning. Of all the things we'd considered, I don't think snow was on my agenda till I walked out the door a moment ago. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inauguration as we officially begin the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. Once again, all three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history, striving to be better than it had been. And we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment, people all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together. The Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division, it's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call to the podium a longtime friend of the president-elect and his family, Father Leo O'Donovan, to lead us in an invocation. Please stand if you are able and remain standing for the national anthem and the pledge to our flag.
Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess our past failures to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, to caring for one another in word and deed, especially the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. Today, it is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of our national colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bomb bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from the city of South Fulton, Georgia Fire and Rescue Department, President of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3920, Fire Captain Andrea M. Hall, for the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What you are all about to be part of, America, is a historic moment of firsts. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's Own United States Marine Band.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me, As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land was made for you and me. Oh, this land was made for you and me. You and me. Oh, America, God shed His grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood. From sea to shining sea. Una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Let's get loud. This land was made for you and me.
Well, that was great. The sun is shining, and Mr. President-elect, this is the first inauguration in the history of America where J-Lo was the warm-up act for Chief Justice Roberts. With that, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr.
Thank
President.
you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
My fellow Americans, a moment we have all been waiting for. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Chief Justice Roberts, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, and my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation, We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself. A cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make healthcare secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. no nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the great mall where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever, not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. If you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans, all Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay at bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, or rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. It's what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic, those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. We'll honor them for becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us, It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together, we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch, but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Garth Brooks to perform Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound then saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. If I can ask you to sing this last verse with me, not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Hard not to be reminded of President Obama's singing that same song at the Mother Emanuel Church. A song that in our culture is as close to both poetry and prayer as you could possibly come. And we're going to finish with those two things. Let me introduce Amanda Gorman, our nation's first ever National Poet Laureate.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Thank you, Amanda Gorman. Now for our benediction, I'm pleased to introduce Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, the pastor of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our President, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace and not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being, regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated and remain in your seats while the President and official party depart the platform. For safety reasons, your ushers will release your section in an organized manner, following the playing of our national march, The Stars and Stripes Forever.
Well, Janet, we really witnessed something today. What did we witness? Janet, we really witnessed something today. What did we witness? Secession, orderly, disciplined. Orderly, disciplined secession. I'd like to make a couple of remarks in terms of Abraham Lincoln. He was quoted 3 times, now not by necessarily President Biden, but from the time the ceremony started. And 2 of the quotes were coming from his inauguration. How about the first youth poet, Amanda Gorham? She was tremendous, using words like rebuild and recovery. But she's awfully skilled in alliteration.
Yes, Amanda Gorman's poem, The Hill We Climb,
an uplifting moment. Poets have been included in the ceremony since 1961. We were talking a little bit earlier, Robert Frost that year for Kennedy's inauguration read a poem, and it's one of these ways in which this tradition is expanding and contracting, right? There are different things each year, and there are some things that are the same from one to the next, but one constant is the peaceful transfer of power.
You know, at times during inaugural ceremonies, you can see things that look regal, and then you have something that was just so common and it just fit. Garth Brooks walking down the staircase and singing Amazing Grace, and when he left, it's as if his horse was hitched on the east side of the Capitol and he rode off. It was just wonderful.
You know, the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Chairman Blunt said, we're witnessing an event both commonplace and miraculous. And I think you just summed it up right there. The commonality that we feel when we see musical performances, when we hear live music, and then this miraculous moment where we see this changeover of power. And it's something which is unique to the United States, this ceremony. Nobody else does anything like this. And nobody else has a live stream feed like ours, because we have cameras in places.
Even now.
We have cameras in places nobody else does. So we're getting some angles here. You can see the Obamas there.
Secretary Chow behind Mrs. Obama, Senator McConnell's wife.
That's VP Harris's children just behind them. Cole and Ella. Ella has the decorated shoulders on her jacket. There's Clinton, former President Clinton with the Obamas there as well. And this is the part where everybody gets up and starts to make their way back off the platform, back into the Capitol. We saw VP Harris and her husband going through the crypt a few moments ago.
You know, President Biden, within the first sentence or two, used these three words: our determined democracy.
That's
I thought
the
that was
theme.
pointed. Yes.
That's the theme of this 59th inaugural ceremonies. That's the theme that the JSEC selected. And a wonderful phrase to encapsulate this: our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. And a few people made reference to it. You also mentioned how Biden's inaugural speech, he quoted others. And there's so many famous quotes that come to us from presidential inaugural speeches.
That's why inaugurations are so important. I mentioned earlier about Thomas Jefferson's quote. What about Andrew Jackson mentioning about government, that it should be for the good of the people, and that the people will direct, and that government should respect the privacy of persons and position. Andrew Jackson. We could go on about
FDR. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And Lincoln, the better angels of our nature, comes from one of his inaugural speeches. This is a moment where, and they vary in length. We've had long inaugural speeches in our nation's history. We've had short ones. We've had fatally long inaugural speeches.
Poor President Harrison, you had to bring that up. President Reagan mentioning, hey, it's not the people that have failed government. It's government that needs to be accountable to the people. And we see President Obama there, who's in his inaugural address, his first one, the remaking of America.
There's the poet Amanda Gorman there at the lower right of your screen. And President Obama hugging Lady Gaga.
The lady, what a tremendous rendition of the national anthem.
An incredible performance.
I'm not sure if that was a designer of a dress or an architect that built that dress. That is.
She's certainly found something to rival the architecture and the iconography of the Capitol. And I mean, we've talked a little bit about fashion choices, how to stand out in the crowd.
Now, you mentioned this.
Here we are, the young poet Amanda Gorman shaking hands with former President Clinton.
Now, you just mentioned Miss Gorman, who has a speech impediment. And Janet, who else has a speech impediment?
President Biden.
How about Maya Angelou?
Maya Angelou, another poet who has spoken. So that's the poet Amanda Gorman in a yellow jacket, and we see Lady Gaga and Michelle Obama hugging here.
Well, there'll be a few pictures taken there.
We're
we go back to the East Front.
East Front steps.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not over. What do we mean by it's the departure of Mr. Pence?
There's just as many iconic ceremonies that happen after the swearing of the oath as there are before. And there are just as many moments for us to watch and see these behind the scenes perspectives. I believe that's Hillary Clinton there, yeah, with
Sure
the
is.
purple scarf.
No, I've just been someone that at times when we finished our assignments, which casually worked my way to the East Front, and there's hundreds, if there's more than a few thousand people for the departure ceremony. There's prayer that's rendered. There's pomp and circumstance. It's ceremonial.
Well, again, we talked a little bit earlier about how where is the president inaugurated versus where is the president not inaugurated. And this happens here at the Capitol,
Yes.
the home of the legislative branch, the home of Congress. And then so this departure ceremony, this moment where our new president and vice president depart from the Capitol and into their term really is a historic moment, and it's a crucial part of this ceremony. Now, one thing that's different this year is that traditionally there is an inaugural luncheon that's held shortly after taking of the oaths.
In the old House chamber known as Statuary Hall, well, as you said, this year because of the pandemic, we're not having it.
That's the poet Amanda Gorman there in the yellow jacket again. And a beautiful view of the dome here on the west front of the Capitol. Again, those flags there representing the center one is our current flag, 50 stars for 50 states. The ones at the far ends for the 13 colonies that were in the Union in the beginning.
Friends, we have a video clip for you right now.
When applicable, following the swearing-in ceremonies on the west front of the U.S. Capitol, the outgoing president and first lady leave the Capitol to begin their post-presidential lives. Traditionally, the president's departure takes place with little ceremony. In 1797, George Washington attended the inauguration of his successor, John Adams. With few exceptions, subsequent departing presidents followed Washington's example. Until the early 20th century, the departing president also usually accompanied the newly elected president on the carriage ride from the Capitol to the White House following the inauguration. In the early 20th century, a new tradition evolved whereby the outgoing president quietly left the Capitol immediately following the swearing-in ceremony. In 1909, after congratulating President Howard Taft, former President Theodore Roosevelt left the Capitol for Union Station, where he took a train to his home in New York. Outgoing Presidents Coolidge and Hoover also left the Capitol for Union Station, where they traveled home by train. Outgoing Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Johnson left the Capitol by car. In recent years, the newly installed president and vice president have escorted their predecessors out of the Capitol after the swearing-in ceremony. The members of the JSIC gather on the stairs on the east front of the Capitol building and watch as the new vice president escorts the outgoing vice president and his spouse out of the Capitol through a military cordon. Then, the new president escorts the outgoing president and his spouse through the military cordon. Since Gerald Ford's departure in 1977, the former president and first lady have left the Capitol grounds by helicopter, weather permitting.
We have these wonderful videos detailing some of the traditions behind our inauguration that we get to show you. And here we are preparing to see the departure going down the east front of the Capitol steps. The members of the Joint Committee are going to line up, and you can see VP Harris there in the purple getting ready. They're getting ready to head out the east doors, the rotunda behind them in this shot, going down through the military cordon and out to the waiting cars.
Have we noticed that the weather conditions have improved dramatically?
Well, we've had some weather changes today. I take back everything I said in the first hour of the broadcast about the nice 40-degree day that we had. We had some snow flurries in there, then the sun came out. We're really being taken for a ride today. You know, there were blizzard conditions for William Howard Taft's inauguration. They had to hold that one inside as well.
Notice who was the lead person out the east front. Eugene Goodman.
United States Capitol Police Officer Eugene O. Goodman there. He was the gentleman that you saw in the light-colored coat, acting Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, acting Deputy Senate Sergeant-at-Arms for the day. Here we go. the Harrises and the Pences walking down the steps, or excuse me, Mr. Emhoff and Ms. Harris going down the steps here. The East Front steps going through the military cordon and taking a moment on the East Front steps together.
This has to be a pointed moment for particularly the Pences. We don't know what the future holds for them, but
You know, Al Gore was my college graduation speaker, and he said the moment that it took hold for him, that it was over, was when he walked away after this moment, and the Secret Service wasn't there, the car was, everything was different right at this moment, and that's when he realized really what the changeover was. He referenced that in his speech at my graduation.
you know, something that is going on right now that we can't see, the staff, meaning the outgoing staff, I'm sure are just probably in tears right now. I've seen that at a distance, and just knowing that this is final, this is final, this is.
I mean, I think
this
we'd
is
be
closure.
hard pressed to think of anyone for whom this is not an emotional day. Not just the people who are directly involved in the administration, but the folks who work here at the Capitol who witness these every couple of years like we do, and the folks watching at home have got to have emotions bound up in these moments. And especially when you feel empathy for the various people and think of the emotions that are going through those heads. That's usually where it gets me. So we can see former VP Pence getting into the car here on the East Front, taking a last look at the Capitol and a wave to the staff and the military cordon, and the JCIC, the Joint Congressional Committee on Inauguration and Ceremonies.
In time, we will have on the East Front the passing of the review, a review passing the review.
We'll see the pass and review here on
Yes.
the East Front in coming up in a little bit. We'll see them standing there and watching, reviewing all of the troops going by.
Now, I was not assigned to the Old Guard. I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I've been in a lot of processions and reviews. And it feels like, for example, let's say President Biden is physically looking at everyone there. It's not the case, but as someone that has served, you feel that way.
Well, we were talking earlier about members of Congress, making appearances on our tours and acknowledging the members of the public, folks from all over the country and people from all over the world that are visiting us. But the members of Congress, the senators, also frequently acknowledge us when we're in positions of support like this. Representative John Lewis always took the time to stop, recognize us, because one of the things that we do in addition to providing tours is to provide support for congressional events. And this is the granddaddy of congressional events for the year. Other times we're there for, like for Representative Lewis memorial service this past summer, but also congressional gold medal ceremonies. Great view of the East Front here.
Yes, you mentioned Mr. Lewis, that on those very steps where Vice President Harris and her husband are ascending now was this casket.
Yes, right where
this is all within the last year.
Standing. Just this past summer, just about 6 months ago or so, that is where Congressman Lewis's casket was. And actually, Speaker Pelosi is standing in almost the exact same position the cameras captured her on that evening. And you can see the JCIC there as well. So members of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugurations, on inaugural ceremonies, they
excellent camera shot here. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, it's fabulous. Look at, we can see everybody here.
Yes.
So just a reminder for the folks at home, Steny Hoyer there in the red scarf, the Speaker of the House in the teal coat that we see there. That's Senator Blunt with her. He is the chair of this Joint Congressional Committee that is the official host of inaugurations and the host of our live stream today. And here they are all coming back in through the East Front door, making this turn. And then there are a few things that need to happen before we have some gift presentations coming up a little bit later on. That would normally happen during the inaugural luncheon.
Day is far from done. We have President Biden that has some ceremony signings in the president's room that President Washington thought of, to think back in 1780s that President Washington thought, let's have a president's room. It took until the 1850s for them to complete it.
looking at the east front of the Capitol, when you see it from a shot like this, we think of them as the new House and Senate, but of course, they're not that new.
No.
The new House and Senate chambers are at the far ends of the building. It's called a hyphen, the way that they're connected off the end there. So those are actually cropped out in this view of the east front that we see here. So what you're looking at, if you can imagine, instead of that huge white painted cast iron dome, if you can imagine a shorter one, wood with a copper roof, and that copper roof, turning green over time. That's an idea of what the Capitol looked like back when Jefferson, well, not Jefferson was inaugurated, back when Monroe was inaugurated, let's say.
Ceremonial unit. You can.
All right, we've got another video coming up, and we have these great videos that are taking you
First
through.
official actions taken by the newly sworn President of the United States occur in the President's room just off the Senate chamber in the U.S. Capitol. After the departure of the former President and First Lady, the new President gathers there with aides and members of Congress to sign nominations and sometimes memorandums, proclamations, or executive orders. This tradition began in 1981 with President Ronald Reagan. Prior to that time, nominations were often submitted to the Senate on Inauguration Day without ceremony.
All right, I think members of the military cordon here, bayonets affixed. Heading back into the Capitol, you can see a fleet of cars there transporting all these folks. Of course, the ones with the flags on the front there, most likely vice presidential vehicles.
The area that they're going towards is the law library. And then in that area is where Thomas Jefferson was first inaugurated, March 4th, 1801. And his second inauguration was in that room.
Yeah, right there on the first floor of the Senate side. It's part of the oldest section of the building.
Jen, I hope that people can see this pediment that's in this triangle, and it's Genius of America. And it used to be
You're talking
sandstone.
about the triangular section above the door.
Used to be sandstone, and it deteriorated, and they changed it to marble from Tate, Georgia. And so, friends, there was a part of this porch, if you will, that was extended out about 32 feet just before President Kennedy was inaugurated to give balance to the dome. Now you see people around there. That's something that's in the past that was allowed by the general public. I'm talking about the 1940s, 30s. It was just overwhelmed with people, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have inaugurations on the east side anymore.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier there's a famous photo from Lincoln's inaugural where he's out here, and the crowd around him is so thick you can hardly pick out Lincoln, except for his exceptional height. And in that photo with him actually is John Wilkes Booth, who attended Lincoln's inaugural that day and said, if I'd had my weapon, I could have had a shot at him. That's how close he was.
That would be the last speech he would make.
Now, speaking of Lincoln and the Civil War, flanking that door are figures of war and peace in those niches there on either side of the east front door. So again, the east front of the Capitol was the traditional front of the building. The Statue of Freedom on top faces this direction. Of course, you were just discussing the pediment, the sculpture that's there above the door. Of course, there's no part of the Capitol that's not ornate. And there is no back of the Capitol. There's an east front and there's a west front. And I think maybe we need to emphasize that today. So here, everything's happening on both fronts of the Capitol today. Here on the east front, we saw arrivals coming in earlier. We've got departures, the pass and review coming up. And as for the actual swearing in, over on the west front side.
All three branches of government.
This is shot inside the president's
Of
room,
the
folks.
press. Friends, look at these beautiful floors. These are English Minton tiles from
Minton tiles.
Stoke-upon-Trent in England. They're $2.03 per tile. And what you're seeing, I love this camera view, is President Washington's cabinet. It looks like Henry Knox, Secretary of War, in the corner there.
I don't know if I can emphasize enough how unique this opportunity is for us to see this. I worked at the Capitol now for 12 years, and I've seen the inside of this room maybe half a dozen times.
Ladies and gentlemen, stand by for a video on the signing ceremony. You want to see this.
The first official actions taken by the newly sworn President of the United States occur in the President's room just off the Senate chamber in the U.S. Capitol. After the departure of the former President and First Lady, the new President gathers there with aides and members of Congress to sign nominations and sometimes memorandums, proclamations, or executive orders. This tradition began in 1981 with President Ronald Reagan. Prior to that time, nominations were often submitted to the Senate on Inauguration Day without ceremony.
So the president's room is a really special room inside the Capitol, and we're actually not going to be able to show you the moments, some of the moments here that we're recording them for posterity, but they're not necessarily going to be live because of the importance of what happens in this space.
You mentioned importance. In 1964, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., along with President Lyndon Baines. Janet, you mentioned the importance of this room. In 1964, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act. A little story with this. Quite a few years ago, there's a person that comes to me, and she wants to bring her daughter to see a video of the visitor center. And so she says, I just want to see that. I said, well, that's fine. And little did I know at that time when she left, and she says, I'm Lenny Bird. It's President Johnson's daughter who wants her granddaughter to see her father in the video. It was such a moving moment for me.
So we're coming up on the signing ceremony here today, folks, and we have some video about that.
While the tradition of an inaugural luncheon dates back as far as 1897, when the Senate Committee on Arrangements gave a luncheon for President McKinley and several other guests at the Capitol, it did not begin in its current form until 1953. That year, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Mrs. Eisenhower, and 50 other guests of the JASIC dined on cream chicken, baked ham, and potato puffs in the now restored Old Senate Chamber. From the mid-19th century to the early 20th century, presidents left the Capitol after the swearing-in ceremonies and traveled to the White House for a luncheon prepared by the outgoing president and First Lady. In 1949, Secretary of the Senate Leslie Biffle hosted a small lunch for President Truman in his Capitol reception room. They dined on South Carolina turkey, Smithfield ham, potato salad, and pumpkin pie. In 1953, the JASIC began its current tradition of hosting a luncheon for the president, vice president, and their spouses, Senate leaders, the JASIC members, and other invited guests. At the inaugural luncheon in 1981, newly sworn-in President Ronald Reagan announced the release of 52 American citizens who had been held hostage in Iran for 444 days. Traditionally, the luncheon often features cuisine reflecting the home states of the new president and vice president or the JASIC chairman, as well as the theme of the inauguration. The program includes speeches, gift presentations from the JASIC, and toasts to the new administration.
So this is the site of our broadcast today. This is the Russell Senate Office Building. And we discussed a little bit earlier how prior to the early 20th century, the members of Congress didn't have separate offices. They used their desks on the floor of the chambers.
Another Republican said he's not the only one. And just finally, I heard this throughout the day from a lot of Republicans who were texting me who said they were actually glad that Donald Trump was not there. that it was important that it was Joe Biden's day and moving on. Wolf?
Arlette Saenz is with us. She's our newest White House correspondent, having covered the Biden campaign, the Biden transition. Now she'll be covering the Biden presidency. Arlette, what are you bracing for?
Well, Wolf, you heard President Biden issuing this call to unity, which was really a hallmark from the very beginning of his campaign when he declared this as a battle for the soul of the nation. But right after he made these calls for unity, the president also made it clear that he is ready to get right to work. In fact, both President Biden and Vice President Harris have now tweeted from the official POTUS and VP accounts on Twitter. And President Biden tweeted, "There is no time to waste when it comes to tackling the crises we face. That's why today I am heading to the Oval Office to get right to work delivering bold action and immediate relief for American families." Now, later this afternoon, the president will spend some time in the Oval Office where he will be signing some executive orders, some of them undoing policies from the Trump administration, including that reversing that ban on travelers from Muslim majority countries. There will also be items relating to the pandemic. He will be signing an executive action that would require masks in all federal buildings. He can't quite mandate masks nationwide, but he is encouraging that during this pandemic, people do embrace mask wearing. And we have also heard from Vice President Harris on Twitter, who says she is ready to serve. Now, it is also worth noting that Biden is now part of two historic White Houses. He first served alongside President Obama, the first African American to serve as president. And now Biden is going to the White House and bringing with him the first woman, the first also Black woman and South Asian woman. And you heard him in his remarks say, "Don't tell me things can't change." And I also just want to note what an emotional moment this was for the Biden family, as Beau Biden is also always top of mind for them. And today, the Biden family will be going from Wilmington to the White House.
Very important. It was very emotional. And Anderson, I was especially moved when we heard the new president say and do something that we probably never heard the former president say. He offered a silent prayer in memory of the 400,000 Americans who have lost their lives to this coronavirus.
You're watching there the Clintons heading off from the inauguration. I want to bring in CNN contributor Kate Anderson Brower, CNN presidential historian Tim Naftali. Tim, just from a standpoint of history and other inaugural addresses and inaugural events, as we see the Obamas leaving as well, what did you make of this one?
This President Biden's inaugural address was a powerful confection of Lincoln, St. Augustine, and Joe Biden. In fact, I think it's among the most Lincoln-esque of the modern inaugural addresses. And in quoting St. Augustine, I think he laid out a path for unity. Unity could be a meaningless phrase, but what he said is he evoked St. Augustine by saying, we want to find the common objects of our love. And then he defined them: respect, security, opportunity, and yes, truth. And it was his way of saying, we don't have to agree on tax policy, but what we need, what we are clamoring for now is unity on the big things that matter, the things that hold us together as Americans. And the other note is that he made this note of American values. He was pushing against the idea that we are a hopelessly divided society with different value systems. He was driving home his belief, his hope, that we really have one value system, but it is due to misinformation and disinformation that we've divided into these tribes. So it was a hopeful, powerful message that channeled previous presidents, but with very characteristic Biden-esque turns of phrase.
Kate Anderson Brower, for you, what stood out? Because it wasn't just Biden's speech. I mean, this is the entire morning has been a morning where faith has been front and center, something obviously very important in a very real way for this president. What did you make of today?
moving beyond this exhausting outbreak of the virus?
Sorry, we're having problems with Kate. Tim, just in terms of what happens now, the challenges that this president now faces, how does it compare to, or how do you compare it to other presidents?
Great political opportunity. Right now, the country is desperate for a path forward through this pandemic. We know that thanks to the vaccines, we will get through this. The question is how quickly. And once we get through this, our economy, which is beginning to recover, although our unemployment rate is still high, it too will bounce back. And so President Biden and Vice President Harris's first objective is one that Republicans share with Democrats, which is to get us through this pandemic and recover economically. So I see there a remarkable opportunity for President Biden to acquire political capital if he focuses, as I expect he will, on the pandemic. So that's the next step, I think. There will, of course, be other changes that he is going to make today, but his main goal will have to be dealing with the pandemic. I believe that's what America expects, and I think it's what he'll deliver.
See if we have Kate Anderson. Oh, we still don't have Kate. Tim, in terms of challenges, though, there's the pandemic, which is clearly the top priority for this administration. The Obama administration, when they came in, they thought they were facing, perhaps the greatest challenge a president had faced in modern times or in recent history. Arguably, the challenges this administration is facing are even greater.
Yes, there's the political crisis. In part, dealing with the pandemic, I believe, will provide an opening to dealing with the political crisis. President Biden, in his inaugural address, also showed determination to deal with the darkness associated with January 6th. He made it clear that while he will be president of all people, he will not countenance violent dissent. He was extremely strong on that point, and clearly January 6th influenced this inaugural address. So I expect investigations to go forward. I hope Congress will work with the executive branch, and so that the violent side of the dissent that tried to overturn our election will be dealt with. So the political crisis will not be far from his mind, but I think he's right to see a bridge to Republicans that we can build while dealing with the pandemic.
Kate Anderson Brower, what did you think of what you heard today?
Well, I think what President Biden was trying to do was remind us of who we are as Americans. And I was very struck by what he said about the exhausting outrage of the last 4 years, and that the dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer, and that we'll go back to these engaging in the international order and our alliances abroad. And I was also struck by what he said, saluting President Carter and thanking the presidents who went before him and the presidents who we'll see at Arlington with him. And in a way, it was just getting us back to normal and what we expect from our leadership, bringing down the temperature and ushering us through this just unprecedented moment in our history where we have these dual crises happening at the same time. So I thought it was very inspirational. I thought it was good that he didn't, do something that like FDR with the New Deal, where it was outlining specifics. This was more of a thematic speech. And I thought that was important to bring us all together and unify us as a country.
Yeah. Let's go back to Wolf. Wolf?
We're about to see a few ceremonies unfold. And John, I want to talk a little bit about what we're about to see. The President Biden will be signing 3 documents while in the president's, what's called the president's room in the Capitol: an inauguration date, proclamation, nominations to cabinet positions, nominations to sub-cabinet positions as well. And you're looking here at live pictures coming from Arlington National Cemetery. He and the former presidents who were there will be going over there to visit the Tomb of the Unknowns. This is an important moment as well. So there will be several ceremonies now unfolding that have significant substantive meaning.
and those ceremonies, I think even especially so after this at the Capitol, a ceremony where the new president stressed unity, that will be a huge challenge ahead. The fact that the former presidents, including the Republican President George W. Bush, along with Presidents Clinton and Obama, will travel with him to Arlington National Cemetery for that wreath laying. Again, a very important symbol to the country and the world that we respect each other, we can get along, we can set aside differences for the bigger things that matter to all of us. That's the message the new president is trying to show today. And in between, you mentioned this ceremony we're about to see, signing those cabinet and sub-cabinet nominations, other proclamations. He's president now. His signature carries the weight of president of the United States. He has a very ambitious agenda in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of trying to get his team in place. So he has to get about the official business. And it's all part of this giant change. Those pictures, the unity, the diversity on that platform that you see there now, from the performers to the speakers to the swearing in of Vice President Harris to the young poet, the diversity in the pictures, the diversity in the performance, a message of change there. And then in signing these documents and sending up a new team that has a very different approach to government than the Trump team. President Trump, now former President Trump, never respected the government, never filled a lot of the lower level jobs. And he needed that government in the pandemic. One of the reasons it was so miserably mismanaged was because he did not have a team in place. And then he rejected science and logic and the type. So the official part of this is incredibly important. By the end of the day, the United States will be back in the Paris Climate Accords, or at least the paperwork will be signed. The Trump Muslim travel ban will be abandoned by President Biden. So you're beginning to see the new policy agenda. But I still think the most important point on this day are these images, the flags, our monuments, this city. And again, it's a giant challenge to carry it through. And I think Joe Biden was very candid and very plain-spoken language about how tough it will be to govern in this world where leaders, including the former president, lie and try to create their own facts. That is a giant challenge for this new president going forward. But I think just the plain spoken language in which he candidly addressed it, essentially a come on to the American people, shake out of this funk. Let's try to work together on the big things. The pandemic does not know politics. A struggling economy does not discriminate based on politics. That is his challenge and his opportunity in these early days.
And let's not forget, in addition to being the president of the United States, now President Biden, he's going to be signing these important documents over at the Capitol, but he's also the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military. And on the east front of the U.S. Capitol, that's coming up fairly soon, President Biden will review the readiness of military troops. This is called a military pass in review. It'll be hosted by the commander of the Joint Task Force National Capital Region, but it will underscore, John, that he is, yes, president, but he's also commander-in-chief, and there's a whole new world out there for military readiness, threats to the United States, national security and foreign policy. As you and I well know, we covered now President Biden for many years when he was a senator and vice president. National security, foreign policy is a huge, huge matter for him.
Absolutely, which is another reason he wants to get the team in place. And one of the reasons he offered a very comforting message. If you're a member of the NATO alliance, and former President Trump sort of thumbed you in the eye for 4 years, Joe Biden said America will be re-engaged in the world. He talked about our power, but more importantly, the power of our example and leading through example. Very different. Again, change is the word you're going to hear repeatedly from me today, because Joe Biden is going to reset just about every compass point of U.S. policy and of the personal character of the man who lives in the White House. You mentioned that the commander-in-chief role. We were on the pictures of Lady Gaga singing the national anthem. But what was remarkable to me, number one, this was a safe ceremony. We have this unprecedented security here. Things went off safely and quietly and calmly. Number two, you have this unprecedented number of National Guard troops here in the nation's capital. They were saluting during the national anthem, as of course is tradition and as is proper. As Lady Gaga sang the national anthem, it was just quite a striking scene to look down from our balcony here as it was playing out and watch the hundreds of young men and women deployed from National Guard units all across the country standing straight up in salute as the national anthem sung by Lady Gaga. I'm going to use the word cool. It was cool.
Yeah, it was very moving. It was very, and she did an amazing job, I must say. I'm a huge Lady Gaga fan over the years, indeed. You know, if there's something else that's going to happen this afternoon that we're not paying that much attention to, but which is so significant, the Democrats will become the majority in the United States Senate. 3 senators elect, John Ossoff, Raphael Warnock of Georgia, Alex Padilla, California. They will be United States senators. The new vice president will swear them in. And as a result, Mitch McConnell will now become the minority leader, and Chuck Schumer, John, becomes the majority leader. How important is that?
critical. And again, back to that word change. This is a dramatic day of change for the United States government. And the fact that it'll be the narrowest of majorities, 50-50, with Vice President Harris breaking the tie. But Joe Biden has no cabinet members confirmed on this day. One of the reasons for that is because up until that ceremony happens in a few short minutes, Republicans controlled the chamber and they dragged their feet. They would not give hearings to the Biden nominees. They said it was because of the coronavirus. Then they did have some legitimate concerns after the insurrection. But it is not normal that we don't have at least the defense secretary, the Department of Homeland Security since 9/11, the Secretary of State. Normally, no matter whether it's a Democrat or Republican, the Senate tries to get those teed up so that they can be confirmed on this first day. But by the end of this day, another dramatic change. Again, the narrowest of majorities, which will still make it hard for Joe Biden to get big policy initiatives through. But you do control the Senate floor. You control the committees. Therefore, the Biden team can now move much more quickly through the United States Senate.
And now, for the first time in a while, the Democrats will not only be in the White House, control the White House, but the House of Representatives narrowly and the Senate very, very narrowly. But the Democrats are the majority.
Right. Just as when President Trump came to town, he had a Republican Senate and a Republican House. Joe Biden, the Democrats now have complete control of Washington. I will say the Democratic majority in the House is very narrow. The Democratic majority in the Senate is the narrowest possible. Again, 50-50 with the vice president. This will be one of the creative political tensions of this new administration, because the Republicans are saying, you know, your majorities are very close. This was a close election climate. The Republicans actually picked up seats in the House. You should go slow, Mr. President. You should reach out to us, Mr. President. That's what the Republicans will say. The progressives, especially on the Democrat side, will say, go bold. We have the power. Let's use it. Let's use it on climate change. Let's use it on healthcare policy. Let's use it on economic policies. This will be one of the constant tensions of the Biden administration. Again, one of the leadership challenge he faces. At the moment, Democrats are united. They are joyous, overjoyed at this day. When it comes to some of the policy issues, there will be tension. But I will say this, Wolf, I'm looking at my emails during the last segment, getting emails from both Democrats and Republicans about policy questions. God forbid we actually have policy debates in Washington. We didn't have many of those in the Trump administration. The repeal and replace, the Obamacare debate early on, the Trump tax cuts. But otherwise, it was about what Trump wanted, not about policy.
That's Lady Gaga, we can see right there. She performed the national anthem. She sang the national anthem and did an amazing job, as she always does. But go ahead, finish your thought, John.
Well, it's just this town, again, this government, again, is going to debate big, substantial policies. First, a new Biden stimulus plan, more money for Americans struggling, more money for small businesses, a realignment of the public health infrastructure to try to surge vaccines. Then climate change. For 4 years, the president of the United States, with the help of Republicans in Congress, have denied climate change. That's denying science. It's denying fact. We can have a policy debate about what to do with it. That's what we will have now in the Biden presidency. There are so many issues we could tick through. Joe Biden tonight will send up to the Congress immigration legislation to create a path to citizenship in 8 years for the undocumented here in the United States. A policy debate. Again, as someone who is a creature of the Senate, who believes the Congress should debate the big issues facing the country, it will be fascinating to watch a president with very, very narrow majorities in the Congress decide, let's talk about big issues. Let's vote. Let's bring things to the floor. Let's try to settle policy. Let's vote it out.
Hovering over all of this right now, there's still no doubt, Jake, the number one issue facing this country, I think it's fair to say, is the coronavirus pandemic. 400,000 Americans have died over the past year, and many, many more thousands are dying almost every single day.
That's right. And the incoming White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, told us this morning that without question, fighting the coronavirus pandemic, fixing the failed rollout of the vaccine, that's the top priority for President Biden and Vice President Harris, without question, in addition, of course, to the economic catastrophe that the virus has wreaked and the educational problems, the challenges with so many kids not in in-person school. And those are going to be the priorities. He has already laid out a $1.9 trillion plan that would be for economic relief, that would be for the battling the virus. And obviously, this is going to be a challenge, the number one challenge for his presidency, although they have already said it's going to take months before any of the American people see any sort of results of their efforts, which really can only begin today. Because remember, the Trump administration, because President Trump refused to accept the results of the election and in fact was fighting it figuratively and then through his supporters, his crazed supporters 2 weeks ago, quite literally, refused to even allow democracy to proceed. And that's going to be a real challenge. We'll see, Dana, as a scholar of the Congress, you have a real expertise as to what President Biden will be able to accomplish and what he might have a more difficult time accomplishing. Democrats control the House and the Senate, but by the narrowest of margins. Can he get a $2 trillion package through Congress?
No, but the Biden now administration, his top advisors, they know that, but they also know negotiations 101, which is why you start with the biggest.
We just saw the president and vice president walking through the Congress there. They are on their way to the president's room of the Capitol, where he will sign some documents, and we'll bring that to you live when it happens. Please proceed, Dan. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And I, this, we're looking, well, now it's gone, but those halls were the very ones we were looking at 2 weeks ago with somebody just right there with the Confederate flag. But in any event, they know, back to the question about negotiations, they know full well that they won't get that, but you start big and then you know that you have to work your way down. What we need to always remember about Joe Biden is that he's walked those halls. He's done the negotiating. I mean, as you know, from covering Congress, there are members of Congress who like to go to the cameras and they don't understand, or they don't really care that much about the art of legislating. Joe Biden actually liked to do both. He understands the art of legislating and understands what is necessary to get something actually done. And, I've been listening to the audiobook of The Promised Land, President Obama's memoirs. And I'm at the part right now where he is talking about how he and Joe Biden, when he was vice president, started just like this on day one. They had to hit the ground running because of the financial crisis. And now Joe Biden, President Biden, is in a situation where he's got a different financial crisis, an economic crisis, and a health crisis. So it's almost double the challenge that President Obama had just 8 years ago.
And it's for all of those reasons that you're going to see Joe Biden and his administration just start with executive orders. They're not even going to start with trying to get legislation through. And a lot of them are going to be about directing relief to people who, like, for example, dreamers, who have lived under a cloud of uncertainty under the Trump administration, executive orders rescinding President Trump's so-called Muslim ban that was signed in the early days of the Trump administration. There are going to be things related to COVID that are about providing direction to states and localities, ramping up testing. So there's going to be a big effort beginning today, really, to roll out as much as possible on the federal side. And the truth is, when it comes to the coronavirus, the big failure of the previous administration was their indifference to the role of the federal government in helping to manage this crisis.
Yeah, states were on their own, basically.
Exactly. States were on their own. And it's not to say that the federal government has control over everything over in this process, but the absence of the federal government was felt at the state level from beginning to end, from the beginnings of this crisis to the last days of the Trump administration. And you'll see the Biden administration trying to roll that back. But as you said, Jake, it's going to take a while. You're not going to be able to overnight flip a switch and then suddenly you have adequate testing, you have adequate vaccination. It's an enormous challenge. And it's a mess, really, that was made that needs to be cleaned up. And it's going to take a long time to do that.
Let's bring in Evan Osnos now, New Yorker writer and Biden biographer. And Evan, we've already seen where we're going to see President Biden. Oh, we're seeing him right now. Here he is in the president's room at the Capitol. He is signing 3 documents. One is an Inauguration Day proclamation. One is nominations to cabinet positions. And the third is nominations to sub-cabinet positions. Let's listen in.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That President Biden will sign some more documents having to do with executive actions later. But that movement, what we saw right there was him signing some pretty pro forma documents, important ones though, an Inauguration Day proclamation and nominations to both cabinet and sub-cabinet positions. Let me bring back Evan Osnos from the New Yorker, a Biden biographer. And Evan, one of the things that Biden has prided himself on, and in fact was attacked for during the Democratic primaries because of his willingness to work with then segregationists in the 70s, is his ability to work with anyone, his willingness to work with anybody. He is now going to have to confront some pretty cynical operators in the Senate. We already see Josh Hawley, who was one of the leaders of the big lie movement to pretend that that Biden had not won the election, he had lost the election, and that there was some sort of ridiculous way that this was going to be overturned on January 6th, one of the ones who brought oxygen and really set the stage for the insurrection. Josh Hawley is now stopping, as is his senatorial prerogative, the swift confirmation of President Biden's nominee to be Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. That is Hawley's prerogative. He's not doing it because he opposes Mayorkas per se, but because he has concerns, he claims, about Biden's immigration policy. I'm sure there are others who see it as Josh Hawley just doing another stunt, regardless of the welfare to the national security of the nation. But is Biden, I know he's clear-eyed, I know he's not naive, but is he prepared for operators like that to be doing whatever they can to hurt him, even if that also means hurting the United States?
You know, he said at one point during the campaign, Jake, you'll remember he said that he thought that some Republicans after Trump was gone might have an epiphany, as he put it. And he got a lot of flack for that. And I pressed him on it. I said, what, really, an epiphany? And he said, yes, but here is what I mean. I don't imagine they're going to wake up and suddenly all start cooperating with me. But when you remove the element of Donald Trump, the very specific malignant influence of Donald Trump, everything begins to shift a little bit. And individual members of Congress will start to recalculate their interests. And it's in that place, in that moment, that's where Joe Biden gets to work. You know, what you heard, that speech today, which had a big influence from his advisor, Mike Donilon. Mike Donilon also is one of Joe Biden's close advisors on strategy dealing with Congress. And Mike Donilon said to me over the summer, he said, I think that, and Joe Biden thinks, that a lot of the way that we negotiate with Congress is wrong. We go into the room and we immediately say that we're so divided on these two issues that we're not even going to talk about the other 8. Instead, what we should do is go in and say, let's talk about some of these other things that we might be able to make some headway on, recognizing we're not going to be able to do everything. And that right there is the heart of the idea that politics need not be a raging fire. And look, he cannot control what Josh Hawley does, but he sure can seek out and find those other people in the mix who might be willing to work with him.
We are looking at a view right now of the Capitol Rotunda, where President Biden and Vice President Harris will proceed to gift stations where they will receive gifts. This is a ceremonial standard. This happens every 4 years. There will be some remarks by various people, but not Biden or Harris. Evan, as you noted, he said that there would be an epiphany, although that was more along the lines of the incentive structure would change, that there would be people who would not any longer feel the need to respond or ingratiate themselves with President Trump because he's no longer in power and no longer on Twitter. But the incentive structure that rewards bad behavior, I mean, President Biden acknowledged this in his inaugural address when he said, quote, recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies, lies told for power and for profit. he's obviously referring there to the lies about the election, lies that were told by Trump to hold on to power and by his supporters in Congress, but also in MAGA media, on certain other cable channels. That incentive structure has not gone away, Evan.
Yeah. And, that is, of course, going to be the fact of our lives. We're at the beginning of this process. We are not by any means through the woods. We are in the midst of the dark winter, as he put it. And that applies not only to COVID, it applies to this, the culture of the war on truth, which we are contending with right now. And it is incumbent on all of us, those of us who watch politics, pay attention to it, to not forget who it is who's perpetrating the big lie here and to continue to name those names. But I think what you're also seeing is, you heard this morning, there was a letter from some Republican members of Congress, particularly some of the newer members, who are just beginning to open the door a bit to the idea that they could find some areas for some cooperation. This is not wholesale reunion, but areas for cooperation. And what the Biden strategy is force them to say no to things that Americans desperately want, like vaccine rollout, like a serious stimulus plan to help people in trouble. Force them to put their names to that, and then you begin to press them on their political calculations in a visible way. And that's at the basis of this approach to negotiation.
But Dana, as we prepare for more activities by President Biden and Vice President Harris, let's continue this conversation about people who shared in the big lie that resulted in not only a bunch of adherence to various conspiracy theories under the delusion that Donald Trump was going to stay president today, that he was going to declare martial law, and this was all just some big charade, which obviously did not happen. And not only the big liars on MAGA media who did so for viewers, but also the people who are in Congress. And you just heard Evan talk about the fact that a letter went out. Congressman Meyer, who is an honorable Republican from Michigan, who voted to impeach President Trump. He's a freshman. He did so at great personal, professional risk. Mm-hmm. He wrote a letter, but others on the letter, other Republicans, are among the people who pushed the big lie. Congressman Moore, for example. Yes. Congressman, the one from North Cawthorn, and others. And so if all these individuals who lied and who voted to undermine democracy are just able to just like move on as if it never happened, even though there are 7 dead bodies as a result of the insurrection 2 weeks ago, does not the incentive for it to happen again, except maybe perhaps successfully, persist?
It's a really good question. It's an important question. And, they are going to try to move on. And we just heard from the president's inaugural address, he wants to move forward, but not necessarily move on. And what I mean by that is that, that's our job, to continue to ask these people, the 11 or 17, I should say, freshmen, not all of them, but some of them were part of what you call the big lie. It's our job to keep asking that question, but it's also, our job to heed the call of a new president and perhaps members of Congress who want to work with him across the aisle, and to hold them accountable on the priorities that they're working on, but also the ways in which they want to get this country out of the very, very dire straits that it is in economically, in terms of our health, the fact that we're watching an inauguration that is supposed to be socially distanced, but certainly a lot fewer people there, no parade, no people in the streets.
They were tested for COVID, by the way.
Right, everybody wearing masks. But my point is that it looks different because of the situation that we're in. And that is the challenge for Joe Biden. And it's a huge, huge challenge. And when he actually gets to the building before you, maybe behind you, Jake, maybe even before that, he will start to get to work using his pen and executive orders, not just reversing a lot of what President Trump did, but again, looking forward on these huge twin challenges.
Thinking about what Evan Osnos was just saying, that Joe Biden told him about feeling that the incentive structure is going to change for Republicans in a new era, I think is an open question, really. I think the next few weeks will tell us a lot about whether that is the case. We've already seen certain members of the Republican Party, like the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who we'll see in just a few minutes, participating in this gift-giving ceremony that the president and vice president will participate in. Kevin McCarthy was a part of the big lie.
Yep.
And he was an enthusiastic promoter of the big lie, in fact, and one of the original liars, frankly, in this whole thing. But a week ago, as the House deliberated impeachment proceedings, he did put the blame on President Trump for what happened at the Capitol, and seemed to signal that he was willing to acknowledge some blame.
And there he is.
There he is on.
There he is in the
as
center
walking in
of your
here.
screen, holding a folder of some sort.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of the items that we'll see him.
But he wasn't just talking about
giving.
moving on, though, House Minority Leader McCarthy. He was acting as though, he said, it's not the American way to, there's Mitch McConnell behind him, it's not the American way to act as though Joe Biden is not a legitimate president. Kevin McCarthy had been leading the charge with the false idea that Biden was not the legitimate president. This is one of the things that's so distressing. It's not just these small pods of conspiracy theorist adherents like QAnon. It is literally tens of millions of Trump supporters who believe the lie.
Which is why I think we still don't know how this is going to go, how this is going to play out in the Biden era. Will he have a reasonable opposition party that is motivated by policy and by ideology, or will he be dealing with, and Mitch McConnell walking in there, will he be dealing with what we as a country have been dealing with for the last 4 years, a combination of lies and conspiracy theories and culture wars? And I think that will make a big difference in determining whether Joe Biden can actually get stuff done around here.
Well, if you look at there's President Biden walking through Congress, Vice President Harris before him in the purple outfit.
Now the president of the Senate.
That's right, Vice President Harris. A week ago, just a regular old senator. Now she's president of the Senate.
And the tie-breaking vote.
Presides in a 50-50 tie, which there could be quite a bit of, given that it is a 50-50 Senate. And that is the reason why the Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are involved in a power-sharing negotiation right now, because it is 50-50. The last time that happened, I think that they had even numbers of members on committees, but the Democrat in that case, in the 50-50 Senate was the chairman. Yeah. But it has, the rules are hundreds of years old, literally. But in any case, so there's the President Biden again with the First Lady, Jill Biden. You talk about whether or not Republicans are going to resort to culture wars. Abby, it was just a couple weeks ago that, let's listen in.
Vice President and the second gentleman. Normally at this time, we have a lunch, and probably no person alive has attended more of those lunches than President Biden has. It's an important moment where it's bipartisan. It's the time to bond between the executive and the legislative branch of the government. We probably don't need as much bonding because we already have that natural bonding with you and the traditions here. By those traditions, usually there's a painting at the front of that event that the chairman picks. This time, not knowing we were going to have an event until what we were going to do about an event until late, I asked Dr. Biden to help pick the painting, and this is the one that she recommended. The painting is landscape with rainbow. Rainbow, always a good sign. It's loaned to us for today from the Smithsonian American Art Museum. The artist, Dr. Robert Sheldon Duncanson, he was the best known African American painter in the years surrounding the Civil War. He was based in Cincinnati, encouraged by abolitionists who, among other things, sponsored a trip for him to do some study in Europe. This is a painting that he painted in 1859, and I think maybe it's sort of the classic America as a paradise painting, that a lot of painters were doing them. But for him, a black artist painting this painting that's so much like an American utopia on the verge of a war that we would fight over slavery, makes all of that, I think, even more interesting in that while he faced lots of challenges, obviously was optimistic even in 1859 about America. And so, Dr. Biden, thanks for helping select this painting, and glad to have all four of you here as we move on to my good friend, Senator Klobuchar. The rainbow is always a good sign. Let's hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Door number 2. There we are. Good. Mr. President, First Lady, Madam Vice President, and our very first second gentleman, on behalf of the American people, it is our honor to present these custom-made crystal vases commemorating your historic inauguration. Lennox, which you know is a great company, American company, has handcrafted these gifts for the past 9 presidential inaugurations. It is a good thing I don't have to hand them to you personally. They each weigh with the base 32 pounds, but combined 64. But Jill, I know, is very strong and could take them both. Exactly. But the Lennox company is actually based in Bristol, Pennsylvania, which you know, Mr. President, is a mere 132 miles from Scranton. Since we know today all roads lead to Scranton. The team at Lennox has worked for months to capture the spirit of this inauguration and your incoming administration. Mr. President, your vase features the White House, and Vice President Harris's features the U.S. Capitol. The gifts represent the hope and the faith the American people have placed in you to move our country forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, while the pandemic has sadly limited our usual hospitality, as others have mentioned, I'm very glad we still carry on some of our favorite inaugural traditions. It's my honor and privilege to help present these flags of our nation that were flown over today's event here at the Capitol. Now, I have to make one point of personal privilege on behalf of the Senate. With all due respect to our distinguished speaker and our colleagues from the House, I have to note, not only did we just swear in a son and daughter of the Senate to these high offices, but indeed both these former senators skipped the House altogether. The Star-Spangled Banner is our greatest symbol of our endurance of the American idea. It flies over this building on triumphant days and on tragic ones, over all factions and all parties. And today this flag flew over our former colleague's inauguration as the very first female Vice President of the United States. So to our very distinguished former colleague, Madam Vice President, please accept this flag with the highest compliments and congratulations of the United States Senate.
The distinguished leader of the Senate pointed out that he has hosted this lunch for members of the Senate who have become president and vice president. But I have the privilege of giving a flag to the President of the United States, the flag that was flown when you were sworn in, Mr. President. This flag may it reflect all that is said about your inauguration. America united. May it be a symbol of the hope, the healing, and the just all of the enthusiasm that you have for our country. And as we heard the beautiful national anthem, when we're at the stadium and they say, is our flag still there? Then you say, play ball, right there, play ball. So we're going to get ready to play ball. We're ready to go with the inspiration of our flag flying. But again, on behalf of the House of Representatives, it is my privilege to extend to you the flag that was flown the early moment that you were sworn in as President of the United States. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Dr. Biden. Thank you. If we had the lunch, we would have had California wine. Is that not right? Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, congratulations. With liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Hey, man. Long time no see. Congratulations, Mr. President. Thank you.
Modern technology, right? It's a good picture, too. Well, President Biden, Vice President Harris, Dr. Biden, and Mr. Imhoff, on behalf of Republicans and Congress, congratulations. Very proud of you both. When President Washington was sworn in as the first president of the United States, only a handful of people saw the ceremony or heard the famous first inaugural address. Today, the inauguration is seen around the nation and indeed around the world. Yet the task facing the nation is no less momentous than it was in Washington's time. I listened to your speech today. You talked among the tension and division. Our task as leaders is to bind this nation's wounds and dedicate ourselves to the values of all Americans share together. With modern technology, just a few minutes ago, it captured in these pictures. History in the making for all the world to see. This picture should serve as a reminder of that task that we have before us. As a very proud son of California, it is my honor to present to a very proud daughter of California as well. Today, Vice President Harris made history, and all of America should celebrate that. But we should also remember that this is not the end, but just the beginning. As leaders, we are judged not by our words, but by our actions. So let's go forth from here together, accomplish great things for the American people. And every time you look at this photo, remember the beginning of the job we have to do. Congratulations.
Madam Vice President, Sam Hoff, Dr. Biden, Mr. President. No, Joe, you're Mr. President. And we are so proud of that. Dr. Biden, he makes you call him Mr. President. Marriage is about to get rocky, I can tell. On behalf of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inaugural Ceremonies, I too am proud. More than that, I'm ecstatic to present the two of you this picture. A testament to technology and a testament to history. Mr. President, in your speech, you talked about faith. You talked about tribulations, but you talked about victory. The Johnson brothers wrote a great hymn. You know it well, Mr. President. Today, we have a new day. And that hymn came out of faith and out of deep trouble into hope. And they said, facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory's won. That's what your speech was about. And that's why we are so proud and ready to march with you, President Biden. God bless.
And they're both different. Yeah. Get the whole family in there. Oh, God. Well, thanks, President. Thank you. Good to meet you. I don't know what the question is. Nice. Thank you. You bet. Thank you, everyone.
Watching a traditional presentation of gifts, a somewhat, well, it's a traditional ceremony, somewhat awkward ceremony on this day. Extraordinary to hear Representative Kevin McCarthy saying to President Biden, very proud of you both. Also saying all America should celebrate this day. David Axelrod, I mean, this is a man who was not just one of the leaders in the House, certainly, of the big lie that the president told. He was he wasn't just a leader of it, he was like a carnival barker of it on Fox News and elsewhere, riling up Americans to take part in this insurgency.
Yeah, and he just said that in those remarks, he said we should be judged not by our words, but by our actions. He's kind of in a hole here when it comes to intentions. His actions didn't exactly meet with that. But I think Biden's whole thrust is, okay, today's a new day, and let's see where we go from here. You know, all this discussion that we've been having here about the politics that he faces, clearly we have divisions in our country. In the Congress, there are divisions, but the Republican Party has its own divisions. And I think Biden's going to try and take advantage of that. Mitch McConnell, his goal is to elect a Republican majority. He's looking at states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, where they're going to have critical races in 2022. I'm not sure going down the obstruction road is going to be helpful in those races. McCarthy, if they're going to gain control of the House, they've got to get a toehold back in these suburban areas, both Senate and Republicans. Obstruction and following the route they've been on lately is not a way to do that. Plus, donors that they count on have fled Republicans because of this obstructionism. So there are pressures on them to figure out how to navigate all of this. And it's going to be hard because there is this hardcore base within both their caucuses, more in the House than in the Senate. That's what led McCarthy to do what he did.
And you've been watching the presidential inauguration of Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. This is the Gracious Hope Bible Fellowship. My name is Alexander Red, and it was a courtesy of CNN broadcasting live. And if you're just joining us, we'd like to say welcome. You have been watching this for a presidential inauguration in the United States. And we are grateful to God that this took place in a peaceful way, inauguration without any hindrance or obstruction. And we pray for America to always demonstrate to the world that it is the pillar of democracy. So we conclude this live broadcast of the inauguration. And we will now at 7 o'clock GMT or 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time, we will be bringing you our Bible study. That will be in about 5 minutes. We'll be bringing you our Bible study, and we'll be looking at the book of John. John, the Gospel of John, is essential to our Christian faith, as we know, because John tells us who Jesus Christ is, his divinity, his humanity, and his mission to give his life as an atonement for our sin. And his Father, God, sent him based on the covenant or the redemption of covenant to redeem mankind from the wretchedness of sin. So we're coming up on top of the hour in 5 minutes. We'll be back. So we'll conclude this broadcast right now. And please stay right here. We'll be right back at exactly 1 p.m. Central Time. That is my time. And then it is 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and also 11 a.m. Pacific Time, as well as 7 p.m. GMT for all of you who live in Liberia. So we'll be right back with the study on the book of John, okay? Thank you so much for your time.